Today, we're very excited to have two of our members making presentations. First of all, we have FuseNet represented by Gift, and then after that, PHI. I think the Jacques is still on the way. It's an exciting meeting because we're going to get really up to date with the context of food security and markets in Zimbabwe. With FuseNet, we're especially delighted to have them here. Whenever I'm writing a report or something and I need some context, it's the first publication that I look at because it is very, very thorough. I don't know if they're in the room, Rainbow Insurance Company, Edson. Edson is no stranger, he's a committee member, but he moved company from Minerva to Rainbow. And is now formally a member of the MLA, so thank you for that. And then Catholic Relief Services, are they represented today? CRS has also rejoined the MLA, so two more members, which is great news. I think maybe Gift, if you don't mind making your way down. Right. I've been at 2 minutes. So. Okay, I've got a bit of a briefing here. Thank you. So Gift has been in development for 20 years. He's the country technical lead at FuseNet, and has been there for almost 10 years. Previously with WFP, where he was looking at vulnerability analysis and mapping. As might be expected, he has considerable experience in agroclimatology, agricultural livelihoods, markets and trade, food security analysis and early warning, social protection, resilience building, and monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So thank you, Gift.
Thank you so much, Michael. Greetings to everyone. How are you? Good to see you. You person. Okay, I'm Gift Magai is my name. I'm the country technical lead for FuseNet, like Michael says. So I have my colleague here. He's my boss. So today I'll be humble enough to make sure that I got all the marks. Yeah. So I will just run through this presentation. I think we need more time for discussions. I understand that quite a lot of questions. We have got members in the team who will help us in answering most of the questions. So just a little bit, this is the lineup in terms of the slide deck. Slide about FuseNet, key messages, the season, which is a lot of interest, markets, macroeconomic levels updates. And finally, the projected food security outcomes that I think is of interest for all of us for the 2026-2027 marketing and consumption year. Okay, so FuseNet was formed in 1985 in response to some famine in East Africa. So we are almost like 40 years, and FuseNet has got presence in more than 40 countries, worldwide. And some countries that we just operate remotely. So that's the mandate for FuseNet to provide timely, accurate. We are mainly focused on acute food insecurity. We don't specialize in chronic food insecurity. Acute food insecurity in response to a shock, short-term shocks or seasonal shocks. That's what FuseNet is all about. So in terms of methodology, this is a very long story which needs quite some time for us to discuss. There's a very elaborate process or methodology that FuseNet uses for us to reach at the outcomes that we have. So I'm not going to look at this slide in detail because it may need more time for us. But people ask, how do you do your work? This is how we do it as FuseNet. This is how we do it. But I think if you are interested, we can have some time to really go through that slide. So FuseNet, we're a very small team. Like for the Zim team, there are only 3 people in Zimbabwe, technical team in Zimbabwe. So what we do, we rely on partnerships. for the collection of evidence, the data, the information, all the evidence that we need. We rely on the partnerships, the key stakeholders that we have. We've got an MOU with the Minister of Agriculture, and the government is one of our key partners. And the Minister of Agriculture, we are under the Minister of Agriculture. So whatever we do, they facilitate, they coordinate most of our operations. Even when you do go out in the field, we go with the ministry. Zimstat Met Services Department, the ZIMLAC, two of my colleagues are already out with the ZIMLAC. One is March West, the other one is March South. We are a very key member of the ZIMLAC, formerly the ZIMPAC. And all those are partners as well. So yeah, we report FuseNet countrywide, we report on a monthly basis. If you go to our website every month, you will find a new posting of our updates, our food security updates every month. So for our three major key products are what we call the food security outlook. Like we produced one in February, the food security outlooks. This one projects for a period of 8 months. So whenever we produce our main product, which is the food security outlook, we project for a period of 8 months. So if you look at the February one, it projected up to September. So this is the one that we are running with at the moment. Right, as we speak, most of our projections are up to September. In June, we are going to have another food security outlook that projects for the next months into January of next year. But I think we have some insights into what might likely happen into early next year. So this is how we do it. After every outlook, we've got key messages. Then we have also what we call a food security outlook update, which is a mini version of our food security outlook. Okay. So in terms of the takeaways, there's been a very significant improvement in terms of food security across Zimbabwe following the harvest, the 2026 harvest. So the peak clean season, January to March 2026, we had some IPC phase 3 populations and areas. But with the harvest starting from April, May into June, a very significant improvement in some areas. But we still have areas where there are issues. We are going to look at some insights into the CLAFA 2 by the ZIMSTAT and Ministry of Agriculture. So that improvement is very significant across most parts of the country, but we've got some red areas that we want to identify. So the official projections from the Ministry of Agriculture and ZIMSTAT are significant crop production this year. And they also reported a surplus of between 500 and almost 1 million metric tons surplus for cereal, that's maize and small grains. That's the official report from the Ministry of Agriculture. Another key interest is that the Middle East conflict and what has happened in terms of fuels, in terms of fertilizers, in terms of food. We'll look a bit into that. Price increases and supply constraints are really a reality, and they're also likely to impact on food access, especially for the poor households. Then in terms of livelihoods, there are some typical livelihoods that we feel will be below average in terms of how they perform, and they will impact household access to food. Okay. So the agricultural season, just a review, we had the forecast was for a normal to above normal rainfall during the season. Normal to above normal rainfall. So across most parts of the country, we had almost like a normal start of the rainfall season around November, the first week or so of November, across most parts of the country. So in terms of overall cumulative distribution of the rainfall, in most areas we had normal to above normal rainfall. The issue was with the distribution of the rainfall. Temporary distribution as well as spatial distribution. Those two things affected the quality of the season and also potential yields and production. So that's why that's not supposed to be drought, it's dry spells. Make sure that I'll correct that. Dry spells. So with two major shocks in terms of the season, excessive rains, December and January. I think most of us experienced that, most parts of the country. There were excessive rains in some parts of the country, December and January. Then from end of January throughout the month of February, we had a prolonged dry spell. In some parts of the country, they received some areas did not receive even any form of rainfall, but other areas, less than 30% of their annual averages for that period. Like if you look at this case, between the 21st of January and the 20th of February, this was like the situation. The rates are 30 to 40%, 30 to 45%. This scale is similar to that one. So the rates are 30 to 45% of the annual for that period. So I think for some of us are even farmers, you experienced quite a significant shock in terms of the crop losses and even the loss in terms of potential yield because of the dry spell during that period. Then as well in March, there was some excessive rains in the month of March. I think for across even beyond the 10th in the month of March. And we understand in some places there was some crop which was close to maturity, and that crop was affected in terms of crop rotting and germination of some crops. So those two factors, excessive rains and some dry spells, they affected the quality of the season. But overall, we had normal to above normal rains. So in terms of spatial distribution, there were some areas really performed well, but there are others which experienced quite a big shock from those two shocks for the season. So 2026 maize production, this is from CLAFA 2. CLAFA is the crop, livestock, and the fisheries assessment by the Ministry of Agriculture and Zimstat. So the two agencies are now collaborating. We used to know crop assessments being done by the Ministry of Agriculture. Now they are being jointly coordinated by Zimstat and the Ministry of Agriculture. We are part of the technical team, which coordinates this asset. Sorry, just go back a little bit. So in terms of production this year, maize production, I think the significantly above average. The estimate is about 2.35 million metric tons for maize harvested this year. 2.3 million metric tons. Last year, we had CLAFA 2, which was at 2.2 million metric tons last year. But remember last year, that's sorghum, peel millet, and finger millet. They are reporting close to 400,000 metric tons. So total cereal production this year is about close to 2.7 million metric tons. That's the official position, 2.7 million metric tons. Then the CLAFA is also reporting that the farmers, the carryover stocks from farmers this year was about 140,000. So availability from the harvest plus the stocks from the farmers, they are putting it at about 2.8 million metric tons. 2.8 million metric tons. We are not talking about the strategic grain reserves, which are close to 130 or somewhere there. So that's the official position, above average production for maize for this kind, despite what happened during the course of the season. What also is being reported, like I've mentioned, is that for this year, for the consumption year 2026 to 2027, Zimbabwe has got a surplus in terms of cereal, that's maize and small grains, a surplus of between 550,000 metric tons and 960,000 metric tons, depending on the consumption rate that you apply. Depending on the consumption. So if you apply 10 kilograms per person per month, the surplus will be 550,000 metric tons. If you apply the Zimstat consumption rate of 7.7 kilograms per month per person, the surplus will be like 960,000 metric tons. So that's the position. An official reported surplus of 550 to 960 for this consumption year 2026 to 2027. Okay, so this is CLAFA 2 again. In terms of cereal self-sufficiency, this is a very basic arithmetic. You look at the population of a district and you look at the total production of that district, regardless of any other dynamics. So it's a production versus population. And this shows the districts that are cereal self-sufficient. And that's the scale, we like the scale to make sure that. So I was just checking the majority of the districts, even some of the typically food insecure districts, the chronically food insecure districts, they were assessed to be self-sufficient in terms of cereals, 12 months and above. If you look at some of the typical districts. So what's this? What is this? This is showing that almost over 60% of the districts are 12 months plus. And if you look at the 10 months plus, that will bring us to almost like 72%, 75% of the districts will be like 10 months and above in terms of cereal self-sufficiency. But we've got those districts that were highlighted in red, the ones of Fontaine, the Poera, the Mtares, the Mberengwa, Chiri, and Bedbridges. Yeah, those are areas of concern as identified by CLAFA 2. We went to Mtare last week just to also have a sense of what's happening in the ground. Yeah, I think, quite some, most of the findings that we had last week, they collaborated with what's happening. This picture here. Okay. So how are the markets responding to the harvests? So we've got surplus producing areas where the harvest has begun and they are progressing well. So because of availability, increased availability, prices are coming down. Peak lean season prices for a bucket of maize, which is 17.5 kilograms. A bucket of maize, peak lean season in most areas were around $0.46 per kilogram, which is about $8 per bucket. But we are now starting to see prices coming down because of the increased harvest in most areas. So in typical surplus producing areas, you find a bucket is now $3 to $4. $4 is $0.23 per kilogram. So prices are coming down because of the harvest. And this is really happening across most areas. But we have got areas where prices are not really responding to what's happening in other areas. There are some deficit areas where the prices have maintained at the peak lean season levels. Like in some areas, they remain at around $8, $7. We hear in some places a bucket still sells for $9 per kilogram, which is very atypical at this time of the year. So you also find that in those areas where the harvests have been relatively poor, there's still a high demand for maize meal. And the retailers are still seeing good business because of the high demand for maize meal. Because this time of the year, if you're a retailer, you know you have to really shelve restocking in terms of maize meal because there's consumption of unproduced stocks. What we are also anticipating this year is our grain flows from surplus areas to deficit areas. Last year we had a challenge. There was a big shock last year that there wasn't much movement of grain from typical surplus areas to deficit areas. Yeah, during this season. But this year we are anticipating that this is going to happen until or through during part of the lean season. We are not exactly sure how this will come out, but it looks like there could be a better situation compared to last year in terms of grain flows, regional grain flows. Okay. So regionally, within the region in Southern Africa, the performance of the season this year is much better. I think our guys in the region, they were reporting like almost 8% improvement in terms of production this year compared to last year. And also, we have huge surpluses are anticipated in South Africa and in Zambia. And those countries are likely to be exporting quite a lot. But within the region, they may not find a big market because generally most countries, I think they performed well. But what we are anticipating is that the huge surplus within the region is going to draw down the import parity prices. So anyone who is likely to be importing this year within the region, they might be better placed in terms of the prices that they might be buying at. We know last year in September, government enforced the statutory instrument 87. That's 2025 and 2026. Actually, I correct that. Yes, instrument 2020-87 of 2025. What that instrument stipulates is that government is saying most of these importers, the grain importers, the grain millers, stock feed processors. Starting on the 1st of April this year, they are supposed to import just 40% of their requirement. And that import quota is going to increase. By 2028, government is expecting that all grain that is required for commercial uses in Zimbabwe must be sourced locally. By 2028, that's what the statutory instrument stipulates. It encourages local production and local procurement of grain by commercial companies in Zimbabwe. So this started the 1st of April. So we are interested to see how it's going to run through. Last year when it was enforced, the government ended up opening a little bit for grain to come in, because they realized that there was kind of a deficit last year. So there was an opening up of a lifting up of a softening of that instrument, not a ban. It was not lifted, it was just softened, and government allowed imports to come in, mainly from South Africa. Most of our maize grain last year, they came from South Africa. So we are very much interested to see how the market players, the farmers, the traders, all those are going to behave during the 2026-2027 season. There's something that I'm not going to mention, but I know it is going to come as a question. I know it's going to come from the team. So yes, the next slide. It's showing the imports from South Africa last year, from the South African Grain Information Service. Yeah. So
is it moving to us?
This is how much Zimbabwe imported last year in terms of maize, in terms of just maize. And this information is from South African Grain Information Service. I think most of our maize came almost solely from South Africa. I'm not sure we had any other source of maize, commercial grain from Zimbabwe. So in terms of the total, this is almost close to 790,000 metric tons, which was imported last year. And that's how it progressed. So you look at, that's when the SI was implemented here. When it was lifted, that's when the imports started to increase from around September. And I think what is going to happen, if you look at April, you see that dip, and we are likely to come to something like this from May, April, May, June, July. Yeah. Okay. But in terms of, if we talk of that surplus that we reported, 550 and also close to 900,000 surplus for cereal. But we also have to take into consideration some of the maize substitutes that are equally important in terms of the matrix. There is a big argument that we normally focus on maize, but increasingly, even the Ministry of Agriculture, they are saying increasingly, we have substitutes that are also taking over some space from that equation, which is now a strategic grain reserve, part of the strategic grain reserves. And we know we are reporting record wheat harvests. The requirement per year is about 360 metric tons. But I think for the last 3 or 4 years or so, Zimbabwe has been surpassing that requirement. Rice consumption has increased almost 12 times in 1 decade. Yeah, but those are stats from the ministry. 10,000 metric tons in 2015, 2025, 120,000 metric. There's a huge jump in the consumption of rice in Zimbabwe. And that's also taking a space from the traditional reliance on maize. The same with wheat. We know there's a lot of consumption of pasta, the spaghettis, the macarons of this world. That component also has to be brought into the equation. Potatoes, especially for the urbanites and for a new niche. Yeah, a lot of increase in potato consumption in Zimbabwe. So the government banned the importation of potatoes, but they only allow the importation of potato seed. I think almost all the potatoes that we see locally, they are locally produced. But the seed, they also allow importation of the seed. Yeah, I think we have got colleagues from the ministry, they can attest to that, or they can provide more information on that. Small grains, they are also coming up. Yeah, a lot of increase in production, and consumption of small grains for household and for consumption use. I think I saw an article about a field show in Seke district. And there was an argument from one of the companies, I think it was Zazamatura. They were arguing that why do we need to focus on small grain production in drier areas and not in the wetter areas of Zimbabwe. So they are advocating that let's produce the small grains in the high rainfall areas, which I think makes some sense. I'm not sure. We can discuss it. Okay. Next slide, please. So on the macroeconomic situation, next slide. Yeah, the Middle East conflict, a huge shock. So globally, we see what has happened to price globally for fuel. That's the position. If you look at a barrel, which is like we call them drums in Zimbabwe. That's I think it's 200-liter drum. That's a barrel. So the price used to be less than $80, but look at where it is, more than $100, and it's fluctuating. Petrol and diesel, the same. Yeah, a huge shock across. This is a global shock, and it has affected markets and food access for across most parts of the globe. Next slide, please. So for Zimbabwe, that's how the fuel performed for Zimbabwe. The increases were effected in February. Yeah. So for Zim, I think our fuel, our petrol and diesel, they are 35 to 40% higher than they were before the crisis. And immediately when the fuel price increases were effective, transport fares rose in Zimbabwe, almost 100%, a jump in transport fares locally in Zimbabwe. And then LP gas, liquid petroleum gas, it increased by 20% in April. 20% in April. One of the first products, food products that increased in February was bread. 10% jump in February. But somehow the price of bread went down to $1. I think we're buying bread for $1.10, $1.17, $1.20. But it has since gone down to $1. So what has happened is that with the fuel, with this shock, they are what they call primary effects or first round effects. The immediate effects were on fuel and on transport. Then the secondary effects are going to come, especially on products like food, fertilizers, and food. So even though the last point they're saying if you check around, most of our food and non-food commodities, they've kind of remained stable in terms of pricing. But the fear is that within a few months or so, we are likely to have a wave of price increases for those commodities. I think the Minister of Industry, Mangaliso Ndlovu, he mentioned this at some point that most of the producers, they've kind of absorbed most of these price shocks. But with time, we may likely see another wave of price increases for food commodities. Okay, one other issue is with fertilizers, the Middle East conflict. These are some of the likely impacts. Well, the likely impacts on fertilizers are one, supply constraints, which will bring shortages. Then the other impact will be on prices. And this is what the situation, the impacts or the effects and impacts of fertilizers. In terms of crop areas, fertilizer applications and crop yields, they are likely to be lower. In terms of increased cost of production, if you want to maintain the same usage of fertilizer, it will be at a higher cost, and that will reduce the profits for any enterprise. The cost of food is likely to go up. If we have shortages in terms of production, we rely on imports. And when we import, there's an implication on foreign currency, and that will also push inflation up. But what government is doing is that the government is really moving fast on what they are calling local content. I think across most sectors of the economy, there's this buzzword, local content. The government is saying, let's, as much as possible, rely on beneficiate, produce locally, increase local production. This has happened in mining. It's also happening in the food sector. I think we can also attest in that. So the crisis has also had some, will likely have some benefits in terms of the reaction of the industry and even some of those segments. In terms of livelihoods, yeah. So we had a very fair rain season this year. Normal to above normal rains. And most of Zimbabwe, I think it's one of the seasons where we have a very, very, very positive. This is from the Zimbabwe national dam level, currently at about 93%. Last year, we were at 88% during the same time. But this is a very high level, above normal dam levels. Zimbabwe monitors about 154 dams in Zimbabwe. And of those dams, I think close to the ones that are overflowing, 93%. Yeah. The Mazoe catchment, I think for most of us, we know the issues with the Mazoe catchment, why it is that low. Yeah. So in terms of water for agricultural, economic, and livelihood activity, this year is a very positive. It's a very positive season. If you look in terms of livelihoods, even across the communal areas. I was in Mutare last week. Yeah, you know the Marange area. You could tell even the community members, they really say it's a very positive season. It's in terms of water and in terms of pastures, very positive. Okay. So this is CLAFA 2 again. Anticipated above average livestock conditions and income. This is a graze water availability. So most of the areas in blue, they are saying the water availability is likely to last more than 8 months. Pastures, the green areas, 8 months as well. So it's quite a positive development arising from the 2025-2026 rainfall season. So in terms of livelihoods, from the livestock position, it's a plus. And for those who do hay baling, silage production, yeah, we know there's quite a lot of activity in terms of for livestock supplementary feeds. For those who are doing into that, they are reporting very good progress. Yeah, artisanal mining, there's a lot of engagement in artisanal mining across most parts of the country. Yeah, and that sector, it contributes almost 75% of the national official gold sales in Zimbabwe. I think if you go into any district in Zimbabwe, a lot of activity is happening across most parts of the country. Next slide, please. Yeah, food crop, and so there are some livelihoods or some activities that are likely to have, or some areas that we may likely have below average levels, engagement and income from these sources. We understand there was supposed to be someone from the tobacco industry and marketing board, so they didn't come. But the tobacco sales, the marketing season is progressing, but the big issue is with prices for tobacco this year at the auction and contract floors. Prices are almost 20 to 25% below last year. And I think most farmers are really not happy with tobacco prices this year. And it's not only in Zim, it's global, because they are saying there's a huge surplus in terms of global supply for tobacco. Most of the major tobacco producers globally, they've got huge surpluses and huge carryover stocks from last year. Some of the merchants, the big buyers this year, they had huge carryover stocks from last season. So they were not prepared to buy much, or they are not preparing to buy much. They are not too eager to go into the market. That's why the prices are depressed a little bit for tobacco. It's a very big, huge outcry. I was reading about Urungwe, some farmers were saying their tobacco for the auction tobacco is not having many takers. You would expect to be a rush for that crop, but not as many buyers are available for the auction crop. So yeah, casual labor goes hand in hand with the performance of the season, but because of cash and liquidity issues, and in some areas, the farmers don't have good income from their cash sales or their crop sales, that may also affect casual labor. Livestock sales, we know the condition of livestock because of water and pasture may be good, but one issue is with livestock diseases. If you grow up across most areas, that's an issue. Livestock diseases, foot and mouth, generally disease, and even for the small stock, goats and poultry. Petty trade and self-employment, yeah, they depend on issues to do with liquidity and also the performance of the season in some areas. Remittances and gifts. I look at the issues on what's happening in South Africa, especially for the southern regions. yeah, remittances are quite an issue in terms of the frequency of remitting and the amounts of remitting. Sale of wild produce and crafts. Yeah. I think we're almost close to. Yeah, so for FuseNet, we usually end up with this map here. Yeah, this one here. So this is how we usually end up or conclude our reporting after we've said everything. So what? There is an international protocol of reporting food insecurity or acute food insecurity. It's called the Integrated Food Phase Classification Module. So this is the one that we apply as FuseNet. It's called IPC. It's a standard of reporting food insecurity. So there are 5 phases from phase 1 up to phase 5. Phase 1 being the minimal, and the minimal means above 80% or the majority of households in that area or a district, they are able to meet their food and non-food needs. That's minimal, which is those areas in light green. So those areas in light green, they are in minimal according to our assessment. So the majority are able to afford their food needs and their non-food needs. If you look at the classification, it has got those categories. So the ones in yellow are the ones that we feel are the ones that are called, they are in stressed category. They are able to afford their food, their basic food needs, but may not be able to afford their non-food needs. That's how we define phase 2. They are able to access their basic food needs, but may not be able to access their non-basic food needs. So this is up to September. The reason why we ended up to September is because in June, we are going to produce our next outlook, our next food security outlook, which stretches up to January. So this scenario is only lasting until so our next outlook is end of June. So until we produce another outlook, we are still running with this one. We are still running with this picture. Thank you so much. All questions can be addressed to my boss here. Thank you so much.
Before you disappear, are there any questions for Gib? If so, just raise. I think many of the commercial, yes, sir, at the back. If you don't mind, just to say your name and organization. And if you do have a question, please wait for Tony to bring the mic so that our online attendees can also appreciate the question.
Thanks so much. Tobias with the Swiss Embassy. We looked at the club as well, and I don't know whether you or maybe some ministry colleagues can answer this question. And one thing that we saw was that on the small grain side, there was a big rebound after the El Nino periods. I guess one of the largest productions we've ever seen, but that moderated down quite significantly in this season. And the seasons were quite similar, right, in terms of rainfall. What's your read on that? Why did small grain production go down despite quite good seasons? Thank you.
Is that for the boss or for you?
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, if we have got especially those from agriculture, they can. I think
Tony just maybe let's start with Alex.
Thank you. My name is Alex Ngoa, and I work with the Markets and Seeds Access Project. It's a project funded by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, focusing on the traditional grains, sorghum and the millets, and then also on the legumes, focusing on groundnuts and cowpeas. My 2 quick questions. First one is on I think from the presentation, we see that almost all the maize import is coming from South Africa. And I would be interested to know what could be the reason behind that, because I know a number of countries in the region, particularly Zambia, had quite a big surplus last season and even this season as well. So just to get what could be the driving factors behind that. Then my second question is really not a question, it's just a concern. I mean, when you look at the figures for maize in terms of production and in terms of the hectarage, our productivity is still pitifully low. Pitiful, actually, yeah. So the question becomes, and then there's this push by government to say produce locally. Clearly, those are some of the key issues I think that come into play. If I'm getting that kind of productivity, why should I focus on producing maize if you are economically driven in your decision making?
Okay, I'm sure as you want to respond to small grains. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that question on traditional grains. But I'll start with explaining or describing how the 2024-2025 season started and how the 2025-2026 season started. For the 2025-20 season, to which my boss has just explained, the start was quite good, but the previous season was an erratic start. Given the preferences between maize and traditional grains, most of the people pay maize at the expense of traditional grains because of some disadvantages of processing and whatever. So most people prefer maize at the expense of traditional grains. So with a projection of a good start of the season, most of the people wanted to go towards maize production. So the previous season now had an erratic start. So most of the people wanted now to compensate the lost period of the erratic start with the traditional grain. That's why we had a higher figure, the prices in this season. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Helen, you like to take the Zambian and South African one? Why we mainly import from South Africa, not from stationary?
I can try. So my name is Kilian Mtiro. I'm the regional technical lead for Southern Africa with FuseNet. So when you look at the cost of producing maize, there are two countries in the region that are really producing cheaper maize. Tanzania produces way cheaper maize, and South Africa. Zambia not as cheap when you compare with South Africa. I think it comes down to the productivity levels. If you're just looking at the price per kg of maize, it's likely to be cheaper in South Africa or in Tanzania. So most of the maize coming into Zimbabwe was actually coming from South Africa because it was cheaper. If you also look at the cost of transporting into Zimbabwe, it was more cost effective to import from South Africa compared to Zambia. But I think Alex's question is very important because if we don't increase productivity, it means that the cost per kg of maize that we are producing is way too high compared to all the other countries in the region. And that makes it really difficult.
Yeah, so to clarify, I think we have one of the lowest productivity for maize in the region, but also one of the highest production costs for that same crop in the region. Yeah.
If I could just add something. So if you're looking at per capita consumption of fertilizer, per capita use of fertilizers, Zimbabwe has one of the lowest.
The lowest, yes.
Yeah. So that also plays into the productivity, right? If you compare with the, say, I think in Southern Africa, Malawi seems to have a very high use of fertilizer per farm, primarily because it's heavily subsidized by government. But when you look at Zimbabwe, most of the maize is being produced by smallholder farmers. And most of those are not really buying a lot of fertilizer. So use per hectare is actually very, very low. That also plays into productivity levels, particularly for maize. And when you look at small grains, it's even worse because the cost of producing a kg of small grain is almost double that of maize. So that makes it difficult because you're looking at scaling beds, you're looking at very low potential as well compared to maize. So I understand the shift that we're talking about. If the rainfall is, if there's a very good start to the season, you're better off with maize, just in terms of how much. If the rainfall season is erratic, it's now a risk mitigation measure. You switch towards the season.
And any more questions for FuseNet? Yes, sir. At the back.
Thank you. My name is Louis. I'm from the field. I just wanted to know when we do this kind of surveys or assessment, we also consider issues of harvest and post-harvest, the impact on the durability of the stock of the food thereof. Because I know these issues can really have a negative impact on how these the families or the production, the harvest and post-harvest issues are really highlighting lately. I wanted to know
Thanks. I forgot your name. You want to attend to the same person? That one on post harvest, yes. In terms of the CLAFA, the assessments, yeah. How do we plan to incorporate? Do we or how do we plan to incorporate the post harvest losses?
Thank you very much for that question. I think last week we were the launch of the post harvest technical working team. So thank you very much for that question. So post harvest losses is one of the major concerns. But what we need to do is to establish the stages and the percentages of post harvest losses. When do we experience the highest numbers? When do we experience the lowest numbers, and how best we can prevent those losses? So we are on our way in trying to establish the percentages so that we effect them along the channel.
Yeah, I know in our CLAFA technical discussions, I know you know Dr. Mano. Yeah, Dr. Mano is a very big advocate for incorporation of the post harvest. But I know, yeah. So I think with time we will see something coming along those lines.
So I just wanted to follow up on the response. So when the post-harvest survey was done last year, there was a 500,000 metric ton reduction in production. So when farmers were providing feedback in terms of production, were they already factoring the post-harvest loss? I'm trying to understand whether the 500,000 reduction is something that is attributed to farmer accounting for post-harvest losses, grain that they are not going to use. Or it was actually the fact that the estimation of production was higher when the second crop assessment was done.
Thank you once again for that question. Yes, post-harvest losses certainly is part of that, though we need to establish the actual figures now. But the major issue between those two figures, those surveys should have almost the same figures. They should speak to one in the same, one in the other. Why we had that difference of near different percent? We were coming from 2023, 2024 drought season. So during harvesting, what happens is people will be also consuming. So that's why we had that difference. So during we had almost 6 months difference of when we did the second survey. We did the second survey in March. Then the post-harvest was done in August. So during that people were already during that period, those 6 months, people were already consuming something. That also contributed a lot in terms of that difference. Of course, post-harvest losses is also part of that. Thank you very much.
So maybe are we having another post-harvest?
Certainly, we are going to have that in August.
In August.
Yes.
Very fancy. Okay, I think a big thank you to Usenet.
Thank you.
So marketing is about networking as well as learning. And if you don't mind, could we just do some self-introductions going around the room? It helps you to know who maybe you're sitting next to, but also our presenters to know who's in the room as well. So maybe starting with Sandy, and we'll move around in a snake way. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Sandy Roberts. I'm involved in the seed business cover crop of baby seeds, but I've been on the market linkage committee for many years and still a member of it.
Good afternoon. My name is Priscilla. I'm in English.
Good afternoon, my name is Mark Benson, I'm a consultant. And do with World Vision.
I'm from World Vision as well. My name is Isabella from World Vision Australia.
Melanie with Vision Zimbabwe.
Yes, so my name is Joseph from Zandu Coopers.
My name is Alex Ngoa, and I'm the team leader for the Markets and Seeds Access Project, funded by the Swiss Agents for Development and Cooperation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ralph Masika at Coopers. Hello, everyone. My name is Axel Magesa. I am the Brand Board Insurance Brokers and Leader of Agriculture Department.
And good day, my name is Bernard from the
Good afternoon. My name is Killian Mutiro, Regional Technical Lead with CISO.
I'm the presenter.
Good afternoon. I'm by the from Humus on Complex into biostimulants and microbiology.
Hello everyone, I'm Chukanya Benjamin with the Ministry of Agriculture Mechanization and Water Resource Development, one of the senior crop specialists. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ravilo Mayoyo. I'm with the Ministry of Agriculture Mechanization and Water Resources Development. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Odrek Mkwela. I'm with Tier Fund.
Good afternoon, I'm Yala Zonta Pandua, Delta.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angel Nzana. I'm also from Delta Beverages.
My name is Gary Fowler, from South Africa, working closely with croppers.
Fertiliser, crop nutrition services with Origins.
John G. Ward, Stable Trader.
John Robbie, Origin.
Working Shogashwari, the agricultural partnerships with transformation.
And our other presenter?
Jacques Smith from PHI Commodities. Hi, my name is Tino from Jacob, Zimbabwe.
And I'm Tobias from the Swiss MLA. I head our systems, resilience, and productivity.
Good afternoon, my name is Timothy Bierens. I'm a trained professional person with finance. So it's not like this.
Afternoon, my name is Douglas Mbina. I'm with Tanchesh.
I'm also from Tanchesh 8. My name is Taurai Chivo.
Afternoon, I'm Cassius Nyakua from Delta Beverages.
Good afternoon, I'm Rachel from Chelsea.
Greetings all, Cindy Ashton and Thomas Zimbabwe Farmers Union.
Good afternoon, I am Mikael Pablo from Chelsea.
Good afternoon, I'm James Carnegie, independent consultant on the MLA.
Afternoon, I'm Vanessa and I'm Lucas. Afternoon, I'm Karen Yasmin.
Lloyd on the world regions. Well,
Good afternoon, everyone. Edward here from World Division of Trade.
I'm Dr. Suran Kai from one.
Good afternoon, Vaibhav Samasya from Civil Children Generation.
Brilliant, thank you. So as you can appreciate, multiple stakeholder platform representation from the private sector, development and government, and the Farmers Union. Online, the organizations that we have represented is World Bank, Schweppes, Millibrand,
Lead. Lead.
Profits,
Lead.
and Lead. Yes. So thanks everybody for being with us. Jacques, would you like to come down? So our next presentation is PHI Commodities. And Jacques has been with the group for many years and just kind of trying times.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Jacques is the operations executive at PHI. He began with Origin Group, for whom we have some representation here. Before joining PHI in 2009, he's also had 4 years of experience in operational experience in the fertiliser industry at PHI before transferring back to commodities. So maybe we can hear a bit more about the fertiliser situation. Jacques has built a strong background in commodity operations and local trade. His role has also been extended into the contract farming and import portfolios for PHI, which feed into the InScore group of companies. So, Jacques, over to you.
Afternoon, everyone. Had I known that Gift was doing a presentation so similar, I probably would have just said we should just present it together.
It's a collaboration.
I think the marketing dynamics are quite different in Zimbabwe to what we experience around us. And I think I'll answer some of the questions that came up after this presentation as well around Zambia and South Africa, show you some more detailed statistics on that. But yeah, I think just jump straight into it. We're going to just really look at Zambia and South Africa, because that's what's really going to impact our sort of grain market this season outside of wheat, which generally, if we look at wheat, we classify our wheat as soft wheat, and our major impact is more your European markets. And that's where a lot of the wheat comes from, which is rain fed during the winter, where we don't have rain feed on ours, and we're relying on irrigation. But looking at the maize crop and this current season where we're seeing things at the moment, harvesting prices started at around the sort of 350, 360 level. We are already seeing a drop off on those prices as the market is being flooded. I think John T and my colleagues from Stable Origin will tell you the same. Every depot right now has got major congestion trying to offload commodity. You have an issue where the farmer doesn't want to take storage costs, the commodity traders or the buyers and your mills also don't want to take storage costs. So it's a dynamic that we're really battling to solve in the country. It is something that next season we're probably going to have to try to do better. I know even coming up to the wheat season right now, it's the same challenge that we're going to have. Everyone wants to harvest May, June and deliver, especially on your commercial side. But getting that volume physically offloaded is quite a challenge. And then obviously, as we move into sort of July, the small scale crop comes online. You're already seeing some of that maize being bought. I think Gift, you showed it there, around the sort of $200 a ton out in the farms. Guys are making $20, $30 a ton. They bring it into town. So there's a lot of opportunity on the small scale harvest. And those are the prices that guys are selling at, between 330s and 360s at the moment. Then if we look at our estimate, I've used some of the same Zimstat and CAFA figures. So I've just put that in there for everyone to see. Not much different to what Gift has shown in any case. Soybeans, another one, our market again guided predominantly this season by South Africa again, as it was till the end of last season. Prices are ranging in that 530, 550 level. It hasn't moved a lot, but where you're seeing South African prices, we had sort of predicted they were going to start falling off, and that actually hasn't happened. And I'll talk more to that just now. Look to the next one. In terms of our, again, this is pretty much from Claffer and all of that, so I can just skip through this slide. We find it quite interesting just to look at this slide, particularly just to see where the increases in our growth for the plantings has come from. Again, yields not great. A lot of our maize is small scale. I think if you were to look at this and see how much of that is small scale and what's commercial, it's a huge difference between the two. Looking at the cost of production, your commercial is a lot higher simply because you're relying on irrigation, ZESA, you're paying for water, and there's a lot of cost of doing business that the small guys don't have. Talk about the inputs. Again, cost and access to inputs is a big difference between the two. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. GMB pricing, obviously it's a guide, it's a gauge. It's not necessarily what sets the market price. I think they are trying to work towards a blended price. How they're coming up with these prices is using commercial and small scale costs of production. Obviously, the impact of fuel and the whole Iran and Middle East geopolitics has created quite a worry for us going into the next season. You're seeing sort of COVID level fertilizer prices again. As it currently stands, no one's really looking to grow their summer crops because they don't know what the price of the fertilizer is. If you book fertilizer today, you could be looking at blends like your 623, 23 cereal blends, your common ones, your compound beans. They're probably $200-300 a ton more than what we were paying for the current crop that's being harvested now. So there's a huge impact of the geopolitics at the moment. And then coming to SI 87, I think right now there is pure chaos. Everyone is trying to get permits for soya meal, a product that's currently very short. It's starved in the market, but they want to put a $35 levy. There's no clarity between AMA and the ministry, so there's a lot of back and forth. In terms of the maize, again, it's another one it has been at $10. They were trying to use a provision where guys had to hold a certain amount within their accounts, because it was you pay a $10 levy, but you would potentially have to top up to the GMB sort of price on your import. So if you had a $30 discrepancy, your big mills are keeping that as a provision in their accounts, where the smaller millers are not doing that. They're just pricing on cash and not following the same sort of rules. So I think right now on the new SI 87, even at the ministry briefing this morning, it's not clear where we stand. What we are expecting is a $15 on maize, but potentially a $40 levy for the next 90 days. Obviously, that's going to push up cost of your roller meal and everything like that. But you have two markets. You have small millers. I think our current registered millers is around 600 individual millers. The small millers will buy 1 truck, 2 trucks here and there. Yeah, some guys are maybe 5 or 10 in a week, but they're playing a very different league to your larger millers. So your larger miller might go out and pay a $350 price because he's trying to secure volume. The smaller guys are just buying day to day, and they will pay a $310, $320 is what we're even seeing as low as that at the moment. But there's a lot of the lack of clarity on what's actually happening on their side at the moment. We might see in the next week. Hopefully, I think everyone's looking for answers quite quickly, especially on maize, as well as soy meal, where the market is currently starved. Soft wheat at $89 a ton is a huge, huge levy. I mean, your soft wheat generally lands in the region of $430 to $440. Obviously, with the increase in fuel and everything, that's kind of what we're seeing on the levels of now. We have seen it as low as $390s, $400s. So the levy would then have a huge impact on what our local cost could be if guys have to price it in. At this point, everyone is starting to go into the wheat planting, but with no clear idea as to where the price is going to be come harvest. I think the last couple of years we've seen it where no one is willing to take a risk on the price right up until just before harvest. Go to the next one. Talking to Zambia, I think this will now address the sort of question that came up earlier around cost of production and why maize price in Zambia is high. So if you look at last season, Zambia had a big crop, they had a record crop. They've actually got an even larger crop at around 4 million tons this year. We are going to see Zambia playing a significant role in Zimbabwe this year, whereas last year it didn't. What happened last year is the FRA bought the maize, but they borrowed in dollars, and the rate has moved. So the FRA is heavily leveraged on a rate that they cannot actually move. If they sell any maize now, it will be at a loss. We're seeing private sector prices of 240 at the moment in Lusaka. That price is likely to come off to about 200 in the next 6 weeks. It's a prediction. It could go the other way. We don't know. But everyone is very confident that it's going to come down from where it is right now, given that it already started at about 280 levels and we're down $40 from where we were just 3 weeks ago. So Zambia could have a big impact this year. The other problem that we have with Zambia is that we can't import a lot through our borders. Traditionally, it's been around 50,000 tons in a month. So it's quite a difficult one to bring in. We are limited. Chirundu is our main border post for Zambia. Obviously, with Big Falls, you can no longer really bring heavy haulage across the bridge there. Road is terrible. So you've got to go via our four-way border post. That's the only other way in. But it will definitely have an impact this year. If you look at what our mills and feed producers are looking at now, especially in our group, we're not advising anyone to book South African maize for the end of the season when our maize is sort of run out come September, October. We're trying to hold on. Let's have a look at Zambia because it is going to be very relative. The only issue you have with Zambia, especially with small scale crop, is that the quality tends not to be good for your roller mill. So a lot of the Zambian maize will tend to go towards your stock feeds producers rather than going into the mills. But yeah, in terms of Zambian maize, very relative this year versus last year. But it comes down to FRA also being stuck. They've got elections coming up. FRA has to have a lot of stock to be able to go out to its rural areas, and they have to be seen to be buying the commodity. So they are out at the moment. Go to the next one. So I think I've pretty much touched on all of this. In terms of soybeans, we have seen prices coming off, soya meal prices coming down a bit. They are a little bit cheaper than what we're pricing here. I guess our beans are around the 550 level. South African imports pricing around 560, 570 into the country at the moment from South Africa. But we won't see much coming out of Zambia. They tend to head north. You know, even their maize tends to go straight to the DRC and up Malawi. It doesn't come this way very much, but this year will be different. Soyas, like I said, we won't see much coming this way. We'll still rely mainly on South Africa just because there's not enough in Zambia to really export this side. But in terms of South Africa, we have seen maize prices coming off. Just yesterday, prices came down a bit again yesterday. In terms of their crop production, they're on a record crop. You know, last year was a very big season for them. They are trying to export maize into the deep sea, but they're just not reaching that parity level. And we don't really see it coming down too much from where they are now. But our record level crop, I don't think it'll hit 17 million. But in terms of the crop reporting committee in South Africa, they are normally always within about 1% to 2% accuracy of what is physically grown and harvested. So we can rely on the information quite well. Next one. I've just shown some current pricing, but again, this is already a little bit out. I can tell you right now, we're down probably at least $5 a ton on some of these. But that's kindly what South African pricing is looking at. It's a fair gauge. Obviously, it's a live market. If the rand moves, the prices move. So it's a very volatile market. Every day can be different by a couple of dollars. And then it depends how much guys are booking on the market. If there's a sudden spike, you'll see the price starting to rally. And then it might drop off again as people stop buying for a few days, waiting for it to sort of calm down again. We can go to the next one. So this is just extract of SAGIS. I've tried to use the actual figures as it sits currently. And you can see our imports in April were still pretty large. And what has happened is with us having such a deficit in the south, and also with the worries of what happened last year, where come end of August, we had mills literally starving and running out of maize. Some of the guys have gone and taken decisions, especially for the south. Let's try and bulk up our stocks, get us through when we can't get maize. What was happening last season is guys were trying to buy maize in Chinoy or even Marandera areas and moving that all the way to Bulawayo. It was very inefficient. But you had mills literally running out of stock. But yeah, we still have significant imports, and we'll see a similar pattern come August, September this year. yeah, we can move on from there. So I've just shown the South African crop estimates, highlighted maize there, and then soybeans we've just put in there as well. That's our main two crops that obviously we look at. A lot of soybeans will come into Zimbabwe, probably starting in the next month or two. We generally predict from June onwards, we have to rely on South African soybeans just because our crop isn't big enough. It simply cannot sustain our usage with the need of around 240,000 tons, and we're only producing maybe 60,000. We can move to the next one. I think that should be about it. So yeah, I think just to touch on South Africa, guys wondering why South Africa and Zambia are two markets. South Africa are growing GMO maize, so their yields are significantly better than ours. There's a big debate around GMOs, obviously in this country. A lot of it comes around sanctions, but there is work being done now where at ministry level, we are at DRSS as well. We are seeing that they are prepared to start trialing GMOs, at least to start looking at it. Same would apply to soybeans, but it's a slow progression. But that's a core fundamental that we need to look at in this country if we want to get our cost of production to come right. If the maize is going to be grown and we're going to consume it and export it, we have to be competitive with our neighbors. Obviously, from the seed industry, our seed houses are trying to protect their own hybrid varieties, but there will need to be some change from their side as well if the government approves us to go to a GMO section. So that's probably what's the most critical thing on the pricing out of South Africa for us. And in Zambia, like I said, it's more just the market is crashing. They need a home for their maize. They're going to have so much excess maize. If they don't move it, they're going to have nowhere to put it. So I think those are the main dynamics out of South Africa and Zambia at this point. Yeah, and that's it for me. If there's any questions.
Any questions for Jacques?
We plug this.
Sandy.
Thanks, I'm Sandy here. I'm a bit confused. You're saying that right now we don't have enough space. The farmers are harvesting. It's a storage issue. No one's wanting to hold on to or pay the cost of storage. And yet you're still talking about importing from South Africa and Zambia. So is it that we just don't have sufficient storage? The storage we used to have out of all the silos have deteriorated, not been maintained? Or, you know, what's the issue? My understanding on the one side is that we've got an abundant harvest. We've got a surplus, questionable, maybe it's going to drop another 500,000 like it did last year. Where are we at? What's the issue? I mean, are we still talking about importing? So I'm confused as to where we're at.
Yes, I think the main thing, Sandy, there is it's you have a mill, you can store maybe 5,000 tons, but you've got guys who want to deliver you 10. So it's matching your supply from the commercial sector or even the small guys into the various mills. They can also only hold so much, but it's about who's willing to accept the cost of storage. There's storage out there. You can go to your GBs and store your maize. On-farm storage is obviously very limited. But if you look at a farmer, he doesn't want to sit and hold his stock unless he's got the ability to do it. So a lot of your farmers want to kill their interest bills. And the only way to do that is you sell your maize immediately. And that's where the bottleneck is. So it's not to say that it's a storage issue per se, just the mills cannot handle the volume that comes in. So I think it's that with your working capital cash flows. It's same happens in the wheat season. Everyone wants us to buy the commodity in the space of 2 months for a whole year. So that's what creates the bottleneck on maize as well. You know, so when you have, like, if you look at us as the FCCA members, our maize is pretty sufficient for about 2-3 months of a lot of our mills and what they require. But because of the fears and the pricing issues that we've had, some of the guys have built up a little bit of stock from South Africa, and you saw that April figure of how much maize still came in from April. We've seen our harvest coming on quite strong in May, but guys were fearing maybe there'd be a border shutdown. So they bulked up their stock. And that's kind of where the storage issue is coming at this point. Last year it wasn't as bad, but I think this year that's our main sort of challenge of trying to handle the storage side. But in terms of GMB and all that, yeah, plenty of storage out there. We can hold the stock. But again, you go to GMB Aspinall right now, that particular depot doesn't have space. So now you're going to look for out of town depots, and it's going to work conveniently for your farmer as to which position or location you're in. Yeah, so I think that's hopefully that answers it.
Any more questions for John? Excellent.
Thank you, Jack, for the presentation. I've got 2 questions. If you go to the slide that you showed, the quantities of grain coming in, imported from South Africa, we see a lot coming in when most people are running out of their stocks in the raw areas, right? Your October, November, December, you get a lot of quantities being imported. But then for February, when we are still looking at peak grain season, you see the quantities dipping. And I was just wondering what explains that, and what proportion of what is coming in from South Africa is going into stock feed, as opposed to what's going into raw lumber. And how does that dynamic play out when you're looking at imports from October to April? At least for April, we explained the issue of fears around border closure. My next question is around productivity differences between Zimbabwe and Zambia. Zambia is not really doing GMO maize at this scale, same scale with South Africa. What would then explain the productivity differences between Zimbabwe and Zambia, given they are all relying on hybrid maize?
Okay, so I think on the first one, in terms of the timing of our maize imports, what you might find, it can be weather related. Feed sales tend to also decrease quite a little bit when the rains start coming online. So that tends to be where you see that drop. So if there's a little bit of early rain, you'll see cattle being fed on grass rather than moving towards what you call it, your feed. Then if you looking on, get my train of thought here. In terms of the usage, it's almost a 50-50. Our maize meal and stock feed, they're quite close together. And when you're not seeing a huge discount in the price, what we have seen is like yellow and white maize in South Africa, we had an inverse and it's moved. That's why we don't grow yellow maize as it used to be done at a discount. So that's always had a part to play in it. But yeah, in terms of the two, they're quite close together as to the consumption these days. Feed probably starting to almost get a bit more. We're seeing feed sales are ramping up. A lot of poultry production going on, a lot of cattle also starting to increase. So I think those are the main ones there. And then so just on your second question in terms of Zambia, it's also a cost of doing business. They might have hybrids, but it's cost of doing business. Our cost of production and our costs, our levies, our taxes, 2% IMT tax. That has a huge impact on your business. And how many times does that 2% get knocked on? So I think a lot of our issues on cost of production comes to the cost of doing business. We pay for Zimbabwe. That's now finally starting to fall away. You know, if you have raw water from probably this month, hopefully the plan is that you no longer have that cost. Your ZESA cost is more than our neighboring countries. So I think that's the main impact of even inputs, although they have to travel further, because the businesses can operate cheaper, they get special economic zoning, all of that, they tend to be able to produce some of their products cheaper than we can. When you look at fertilizer, we're importing raw materials to then mix and make the fertilizer. The only ones that you don't really mix is your nitrogen. And we don't really produce nitrogen, although Sable Chemicals is geared to go back online at some point. But will they be able to do it cost effectively with, again, I mean, we can bring in urea and products like that from sort of Europe much cheaper than we can produce it here. So the same sort of applies to Zambia, but their cost of doing business tends to be a bit cheaper than. So I think that's where a lot of their pricing comes from.
Yes, just to, I think to add on what Jack had just said, I happen to know quite a bit about Zambia as well. Yeah, I think cost definitely is a key issue there. I take a simple thing, fuel. Right now, fuel in Zambia about $1.50 per liter. After the recent increase, before that it was about $1.10 per liter. Compare that with us.
And to add, they didn't just change it the day that the war started. They changed it. They lock it on a month.
And we all know fuel is one of the biggest cost drivers in any economy. Then I think a second issue also for Zambia, they have a fairly successful what they call Farm Input Support Program, PHI. Yeah, which is a lot more generous than our presidential input scheme in terms of what they deliver inputs to smallholder farmers, particularly fertilizers. And also they've tightened it to minimize some of the leakages in terms of inputs through an e-voucher scheme, what they call an e-voucher scheme, which has tended to be a bit more watertight. So I think when you add all that, it definitely makes the difference.
Okay, I've got a question online from Olivia, and maybe it's to both presenters today. It's about the predictions of El Nino, and then I'll add my own thoughts to that. It looks like maybe we're headed towards a perfect storm, but with the prices of fuel and fertilizer increasing, plus the threat of El Nino. Any comments on that from anyone? Okay, the brave guy.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. We would have loved to share this on the El Nino, but I think we're a bit cautious because on the 29th of April, the Met Services Department they issued a press statement to say that all agencies, they need to be very careful in terms of the alerting or warning about El Nino until the MSD issues an official statement in August after the Southern Africa Climate Forum, the SACOF. So I think that put us in a situation whereby we wouldn't like to go ahead of that pronouncement by the Met Services Department. But we know last week, I think we read it, I think in Sunday mail last week in the cabinet, I think the minister, they presented on the El Nino preparedness document. I think it was in the Sunday mail. I was just reading this morning, I think in the Herald to say next week, Zimbabwe is hosting the SADC platform for ministers of agriculture, food security, fisheries to talk about issues in the region, including the El Nino. So yeah, there is an awareness and preparedness, but in terms of the impacts and everything to do with it, we weren't going to say much about that because of that press statement.
Yeah, look, I think, Mike, in terms of El Nino, it is a worry. If you look at anyone who's financing crops, especially your contractors, everyone's certainly looking at it. It's a genuine concern for everyone, but again, we're trying to see where the data goes or what is the impact actually going to be. But we'll probably see slightly smaller production, especially on your dryland crops. I think, guys, anyone who grows dryland will probably not take that risk. I think our friends from Rainbow are probably not going to want to fund insurance this season on dryland because there's such a big risk with the El Nino. And if you are taking insurance, it's probably going to cost you an absolute fortune on dryland. So I think everyone's just being cautious at this point. It's, yeah, just give it a little bit of.
We saw a slide from Gift on the water levels, which should give a bit of comfort, I suppose. But the majority of our farmers don't have that luxury and rely on dryland. So it could be.
Commercial sector, what we're seeing is a lot of guys should be fine for the winter and the summer. But if anything starts to change earlier than planned, then yeah, that could also change. And we've seen it before where guys think they have enough water and then at planting, they suddenly cut back 50 hectares on a 300 hectare block or something. So that can still happen. So your planning might right now be for 70% of what you grew last season just to be safe. But you might still be able to get to 100%, just depending on how we get through this winter.
Yes. I think that sort of rounds it up. Jacques, thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, Louis, you got a question.
I wanted to ask about this because when you're talking about crops, livestock, fisheries, we don't have any prediction. There are news or rumors of FMD outbreak. Those kind of information. So I think it would be really good I'll be cutting the big A information so that we can know the status of. Livestock information, livestock presentations.
Right, thank you, Louis, for that. Ross, thank you.
Thank you.
So that's it. I think that's a wrap for this month's forum. Okay, Tony's requesting that everybody finds the register and signs it at the back if you didn't already. Next month we'll be going to ministry to have a look at the Clapper 2 that was referred to by FuseNet. I think in the following month, July, we're going to be focusing on investments in agriculture. I'm aware of 2 or 3 different institutions that have funds that they are looking to invest in Zimbabwe. So we'll take a look at that in July. So I think that's it for today. So thank you very much, everyone.